Moon Knight is right around the corner as the first Marvel show of 2022, so it's a perfect time to revisit the first 5 Disney Plus MCU shows that came out in 2021. I can't believe it's already been a whole year of Marvel shows, and what a year it's been. It has been a solid start for Marvel's Disney Plus show integration into the MCU, as each of these shows brought something unique and fun to the table. As a refresher, the order in which the shows came out is WandaVision, then Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, What If, and Hawkeye. While these shows all offered solid entertainment and storytelling, some definitely stood out above the rest. So here's my rankings and recaps of these shows to get you ready for a new year of Disney Plus content. At number 5, we have The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. The show takes place after the events of Endgame and focuses on the legacy of Captain America and his shield. Sam Wilson, aka Falcon, and Bucky Barnes, aka the Winter Soldier, team up together to take down the terrorist organization the Flag Smashers, led by Karli. They believe life was better during the blip and are roiding up on super soldier serum. Sam and Bucky have their differences as they disagree about what it means to wield Captain America's shield, but ultimately come together to stop the Flag Smashers. Sam becomes the new Captain America, and Bucky proudly bangs his sister.
Hi, Sarah.
A good way to describe the show, unfortunately, would be inconsistent and at times non-cohesive. If you don't know, it was rumored that a storyline about a virus was cut and rewritten due to the coronavirus, which would explain some odd and confusing moments. Marvel has been dodgy about this rumor, and when showrunner Malcolm Spellman was asked about it, he had this to say.
I've been told to stop saying that, and it had nothing to do with the pandemic. I've been told to stop talking about that.
Regardless of what happened behind the scenes, the on-screen result was less than stellar. There were many moments that left me scratching my head. Like, who is this woman and why do I care that she's dying? And is Sharon Carter a bad guy now? Why? On the subject of bad guys, Karli. She was an underwhelming villain, and I was never on board with her personality or reasoning for why she is doing what she does. That's why it felt really weird when Falcon treated her like a fallen hero who was just misunderstood. Like, dude, she's a terrorist that has killed multiple people.
You have to stop calling them terrorists.
As for our 2 main heroes, I am miffed that Bucky's story got shafted once again, relegated to a side character behind another Captain America. His character is so cool and has so much potential, and Marvel just keeps burying him. It's so frustrating. I think the show should have focused primarily on him. Who has more interesting storytelling potential? A dude who wears a jetpack made by the government? Or a super soldier who was captured by a terrorist organization during World War II and brainwashed to be a ruthless killer, carrying out multiple assassinations over the decades against his will, then causing a civil war amongst the Avengers as he tries to escape his dark past and regain his freedom, in an event that permanently changed the face of the MCU. Nah, let's go with the Birdman.
Hey, it's Black Falcon!
And what's most frustrating is they prove they have interesting Winter Soldier story to tell. Everything that dealt with Bucky's past and the ramifications of his actions was amazing.
Means a part of me is still there. Which means a part of the Winter Soldier is still in me.
The moment of him in Wakanda when he realizes he is finally free from the brainwashing was brilliant. And the flashback scene of him as the Winter Soldier was so cool. But that's all we got. I need more. They also dropped the ball on the Yuri payoff. It was a big moment. The entire show had been leading up to it. It was Bucky's time to shine and show us an emotional scene that demonstrated how much Bucky had grown and conquered his demons. And then the scene just felt like letting air out of a balloon. It was a measly 1 minute long and didn't even show the reaction or conversation between the two after Bucky told him the truth. But it's not all bad. There was some really great stuff in this show as well. I already mentioned that the small handful of Bucky moments were great. John Walker killing the guy with his shield was a shocking and awesome callback to Civil War. The epic fight between Bucky, Sam, and John was the best moment of the show for me, and one of the best scenes out of all the shows. And I really enjoyed John Walker's character. I think it was interesting to show how someone who fell morally somewhere between the noble Steve Rogers and a bad egg like Karli reacted to the super soldier serum. Also, all the scenes between Sam and Isaiah were so well written and compelling. I'm a big fan of when the MCU dives deeper into its own world and shows us that these stories we've seen and the events that take place within them have a trickle-down effect on the rest of the world, and sometimes it's not pretty. Overall, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier is a middle-of-the-road MCU entry that had potential to be much more.
Nice job, Cap.
Thanks.
At number 4 is What If. What If explores different variations of MCU stories, with each episode being its own unique story. There is Agent Carter as Captain America, Black Panther as Star-Lord, a world where Hank Pym murders all the Avengers, Doctor Strange turning goth, zombies, Killmonger rescuing Tony Stark, Thor if he never had Loki as a brother, and a world where Ultron won. It is narrated by the Watcher, who vows not to interfere, but does so in the last episode, bringing together all these variations of characters to stop Ultron. They successfully defeat the robot by trapping him and Killmonger in a pocket dimension. I had a hard time placing What If because it's so different from the other shows, and it varies episode to episode. They tell some amazing stories in the half an hour they have. What If Doctor Strange lost his heart instead of his hands is by far the best episode, and one of my favorite pieces of MCU media altogether. What If the World Lost Its Mightiest Heroes is my second favorite episode, and I was devastated at the end of it when I realized there wasn't going to be any follow-up episodes. You could make an entire series on that concept alone, and What If Ultron won was a great way to revisit one of the sore spots in the MCU. I think the whole idea of revisiting old Marvel stories and doing what is basically the equivalent of a fan-made scenario is a great way to expand the Marvel lore, and doing so with animation gave us a new way to look at these stories. Just take the fight between Ultron and the Watcher. It looks incredible, and it's so well animated. The scene is styled in a way that live action wouldn't quite be able to capture. The only issue I take with the series is one of my biggest pet peeves for any sequel of any intellectual property, which is when previously super important events and items are diminished in their power or scale. Thanos was the entire basis of the first 3 phases of the MCU, so to see him effortlessly split in half just undermines his power. It's played as a joke, and I hate it. Or Hank Pym's Ant-Man single-handedly taking out the Avengers, showing that Ant-Man can pretty much clean up any situation himself. Turns out that Thanos' butt theory was more accurate than we thought.
Flick me.
There are a bunch more examples like this, and it just leaves me feeling weird. Like, make the new material fun and fresh, but respect the old material. Great stories though, great animation, and a good fun watch.
You cannot compute the power of my will.
Number 3 is Hawkeye. Following the events of Endgame and Clint's time as the vigilante killer Ronin, it's Christmas time, and the titular Hawkeye teams up with superfan and super archer herself, Kate Bishop. They need to deal with the tracksuit mafia and their leader, Echo. This group thinks Kate is the Ronin after she was caught with the suit on. Clint and Kate work together to handle the situation, which turns out to involve Kingpin, who is working with Kate's mom. She was evil all along and hired Yelena to kill Clint. Yelena believes that Clint was the cause of Natasha's death, so she is out for blood. Yelena does almost kill Clint, but comes to understand he was not at fault for Natasha's death. Kingpin and the tracksuit mafia are defeated, Kate's mom is arrested, and Clint makes it home for Christmas. Hawkeye is what we call a pleasant surprise. That tripped right at the finish line. But first, let's talk about all the good stuff. Expectations were low for the series, because it was Hawkeye. But it tells a really focused, intimate, and grounded story. I love that it expanded on Clint as a human being, and how his past has affected him, both physically and mentally. The scenes that showcase his PTSD and trauma are my favorites, because I love it when Marvel doesn't shy away from the brutal and dark reality of their world. Like the opening scene of episode 3, that shows Ronin killing all those men, and Echo's father. It's so raw. I think if this series proves anything, it's that Marvel can still tell ground-level stories with some serious stakes and gravitas. Onto the characters, I really like Kate Bishop. At first I thought she was going to be really obnoxious, but that wasn't the case. She was written in a way that felt real, and Haley Steinfeld did a great job portraying her young, naive energy. Echo was a great villain, and was given a nice backstory that explained her motivations. Something I wasn't expecting was how good the action was in this series. That car chase scene that started with the long one-shot and showcased all the different trick arrows was an extremely entertaining scene, and I love how they leaned into the gratuitous arrow shots. The show is about two archers after all. Give me those epic arrow close-ups. Overall, this show delivered and had me waiting in anticipation for each new episode. Great characters, great action, great story, great visuals, a cohesive and entertaining watch for 5 episodes. And then, episode 6. And I can't sugarcoat it. The pacing is all over the place, the tone is all over the place, the writing is mind-boggling, it's a mess. You know when a parent says they're not mad, just disappointed, and how that feels a lot worse? That's this episode. It was such a letdown after all the good the previous 5 episodes built up. It left a sour taste, so much so that it overshadowed the fact that Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin returned. And like, seriously, what's with this cliffhanger? So stupid. I think if you add all of this together, this lands Hawkeye in the middle of the pack. If it had stuck the landing better, it would be a serious contender for the next 2 spots. At number 2 comes Loki. Taking place after the events of the first Avengers film, but actually following the events of the time heist in Endgame, Loki follows who other than the god of mischief. He is taken by the TVA, who are basically time cops. They delete, or prune, any variances within the timeline to keep branch realities from forming. Loki himself is a variant, set to be pruned, but TVA agent Mobius signs him up to help the TVA capture another variant. Turns out that variant is another version of Loki, a lady version named Sylvie. Long story short, the Lokis team up to take down the TVA, which is actually controlled by major future villain Kang the Conqueror. They kill Kang, at least this version of him, and the TVA turns into one big fan theory that we'll have to wait for season 2 to solve. I feel like a lot of people have Loki as their number 1, and I don't blame them. It's fantastic. The scale of this show is unparalleled. The set design and visual effects are insane. It's probably the best CGI I have seen in any show. It's on the same level as some of the movies. Now, the plot of Loki is complex, and you have to be a pretty big Marvel fan to follow along and enjoy. But let's be honest, if you're not already fully on board with the MCU, that's on you. The story is so well done and fits nicely into the larger MCU. It's complex, it's fun, it has heart and depth. I love the mystery aspect of the show, as each week we get closer and closer to the truth. Who is the variant Loki? What does the TVA actually do? And who's behind it all? I am all in on the more weird, trippy, and metaphysical stories the MCU was leaning into for Phase 4, and Loki is a perfect example of this done right. It is very well paced and keeps you engaged all the way through. Tom Hiddleston as Loki is great as always, and he really shines in the lead role. Newcomers Sylvie and Mobius are great additions, and Timmy Turner turned in a great performance as Miss Minutes. And I have to mention that the soundtrack absolutely slaps. Natalie Holt did a fantastic job creating a unique sound that fit the theme and feel of Loki. I don't think a soundtrack had more of an immediate impact on me than this one did. I raced to Spotify to find it after watching. I actually think the soundtracks for all of these shows are pretty amazing and have some of my favorite Marvel music, but Loki's soundtrack definitely stands out. In terms of negatives, the only thing is what I mentioned earlier with What If, which is that the show can undermine the previous stories we got. Like the Infinity Stones being paperweights feels weird. And honestly, the entire concept of the TVA sheds a whole new light on all the previous Marvel stories we've seen. I understand that's kind of the point, but it just bugs me sometimes. But besides that, I enjoyed every second of this show. It was very well rounded and continued to prove Marvel has fresh ideas. Speaking of fresh ideas, WandaVision takes the top spot, and it deserves it. The show takes place in a different era of sitcom each week, as we follow Wanda and Vision, and slowly unravel the mystery behind Westview, a town whose people have seemingly disappeared out of nowhere. Turns out Wanda created a hex around the entire town that trapped everybody under her spell. She also created Vision and her 2 children with her powers. It's learned that Wanda's tragic past is what caused her to break down emotionally and create the Hex. There is a witch named Agatha who infiltrated the Hex, as she wants the power that Wanda has. After a fight with Agatha, Wanda becomes the fully realized Scarlet Witch. She removes the Hex and in turn loses her family. Again. She then flies off into Doctor Strange 2. I love WandaVision. Talk about unique, new, and creative. What a bold idea to make each week a new era of sitcom, giving us unique visuals and tones each episode. And they nailed it. They did a brilliant job. This to me is hands down the most creative Marvel property. Like I already said, I want the weird, wacky Marvel, and this show delivered just that. But most importantly, this show was character focused and had a fantastic plot. Wanda's story is one of loss and tragedy, and this show perfectly encapsulates that. It's very emotional, and doesn't shy away from the dark nature of the situation shown. It doesn't fall into the trap of random jokes and quips to lighten the mood. It is an unsettling, disturbing story. There is nothing funny about Wanda's tragic history or what she is doing to the town of Westview. Yes, we get fun moments and jokes, but there is always an underlying sense of evil, something lurking in the shadows, that never lets the viewer get too comfortable. And even though on the surface the time period hopping seems like a wacky gimmick, it actually makes sense for the story. That's what I love. Everything happens for a reason. It makes sense in the world, and as details are revealed to us, we start to understand what different aspects of the show mean. Except for Ralph Boner, that was just a boner joke. But while on the subject, let's talk about the fan reaction and engagement. I have never seen a more invested and active fan base for a show while it was airing. It felt like a collective group viewing each week, as everyone chipped in with their 2 cents, their fan theories, their reactions. It was a real experience to watch these episodes as they came out each week, and then see the reactions on social media. It was extremely fun. Granted, as we know, this was taken a bit too far, and if there's a blemish on this show, it was the rampant fan theories caused by poor expectation management by both the show and the fans. The show was too careless in some areas, like casting Evan Peters as faux Quicksilver, and the fans overstretched in some areas, like Mephisto. And since we're talking about negatives, the one glaring sore spot on the show is director Hayward. He's cartoonishly evil, and he's just not needed. Grief is the big bad in this one, not some random dude. The last thing I want to mention is the soundtrack. It's a perfect complement to the show. The individual sitcom openings crafted for the different eras are the icing on the cake. And of course, Agatha all along. This show is something special. I've watched through it more than once, and I'll watch it again before Multiverse of Madness. I cannot wait to see more of Wanda in the future. She is my favorite character, and WandaVision is my favorite show. And now we await the arrival of the next slate of Disney Plus shows. I'm optimistic about Moon Knight. It looks like it's going to be mind-bending, confusing, and trippy, and I'm all here for it. It's phase 4, and as I mentioned, I want Marvel to go all in on the weird. I want to come out of watching a movie or TV show with my mind in a pretzel. God damn, I can't wait for Multiverse of Madness. Until then, we have this to look forward to. Please feel free to comment how you would rank these shows. Reading what you, the viewers, think is always my favorite part of these videos. Thanks for listening, and see you soon.
Hey, don't sweat it, sis. It's not like your dead husband could die twice.
Every word of what you just said was wrong.